Testing
that
1, 2,
value.
3. Testing 1, 2, 3.
I can hear a lot of
You can hear the ceiling.
You made it sound like
you're
you're
hearing
Union
them,
South
Robert,
Beach
Jamie,
for
talking about.
appraisal.
Exactly.
Okay, good. We're good to go?
Man, that damn truck is gonna be out of the corner of the
Can you hear me?
intersection there.
Yeah.
It's always blocked the, view of the
I
traffic.
think so. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay, yeah, we're good. Thank you.
Okay, you're welcome. Have a good evening.
He's been here
Thank
for
you,
2
bye-bye.
years. What? He also said that,
Really?
he was also like, how dare you make me clean out my junky spaces since.
Well, I ain't buying Starbucks. That's even worse.
Okay,
At least
do we
they're
know about
still here,
Counselor
yes.
Stavanger? Are you texting her?
I'm texting her, but I have not heard.
Okay.
Oh, hang on. We want to confer with the presenter first. Hold on.
There's some interesting information.
Good afternoon, Marta.
Out of our
Can you hear
LLC
us?
land use development that our liaison to the state. Great
Yes, I can.
Perfect. We aren't on air yet. We wanted to
Alexandra?
make sure we
No.
can hear you.
Oh.
You can hear us, so we're good to go.
There's a new
I gave
housing
you,
program apparently.
co-host
and
permission,
it's
so
gonna-
I
it's
heard you
gonna
might have a
come-
PowerPoint.
It's
so
gonna
if
come
you
straight
have
to
a
live
presentation to share, just make sure you share it through the Zoom.
Yeah,
meeting,
ours banned,
so that everybody
everybody
can see it. Got it.
More
We'll
program.
get underway here in just a second.
Middle housing, Oregon homes, more.
Oh, Oregon Homes, they called
it's
it.
gonna- It's gonna allow for bigger, I think it's 12, 20-inch DVH, 6.
What the hell happened to home rule?
Is that
Dude, it's
true?
great.
Are you thinking the one that
No,
says?
this is a housing, this is a housing code for housing.
Okay, we are on the air for our April 21st work session, and our first item on the agenda is an update on our Economic Development Council goal. So I'll turn it over to Joseph Brilio, our Assistant City Manager, and Sierra Fox, our Economic Development Coordinator.
Thanks, Mayor. Good evening, city councilors. A little electronica.
That's your entrance music, man. Welcome.
We're gonna do a little bit of a departure from our kind of standard action plan overview last quarter. It was in your packet, so if we do want to go over that, see what progress has been made, please turn your attention towards that. And look over, and if we've got anything wrong, please let us know. But we have a couple of items that we're gonna speak more to that are all related to economic development goals. And so requests that we made. So I'm gonna let Sierra kind of walk us through that, and thank you, Sierra.
Yeah, so we're starting the evening with a presentation from Metro, from Marta, who's on the screen. We had a request from Councilor Stavanger to revisit a conversation with Metro to understand more about their reuse mall and reuse warehouse concepts. So Metro has kindly agreed tonight to give us an update on that program and the plans in place for that. And once Marta wraps up, we'll also dive into the business license code update, which is another item on our work plan. Okay. So without further ado, Marta, are you ready?
I am. I do have another Metro staff person attending, so hopefully when you see her log on, she may be able to join me as panelist, but I can go ahead and get started.
Okay, sounds good.
Is that SD?
Okay.
Martha,
So let me,
is that SD? I'm sorry. Just
yes, it is
yeah.
SDC Eagle.
Okay, great. Thanks.
All right. I will go ahead and share my screen. Sorry. Hopefully.
Yeah. You can see it.
Oh, wonderful.
It's a lot of tabs.
Yeah. This is bad when it shows your desktop. Hold on, let me try this from PowerPoint, my apologies.
How much you want to put in my bag?
SD has arrived on the promoter to welcome to the panel.
Just a bit, it's fine. Lunch.
15 bucks.
Which one are you doing?
20 bucks. 20 bucks says it has to update.
It's not the new one, it's my profile picture. I didn't know how to-
Come on.
I'm gonna share my screen.
Yeah, that's fine.
Winner. Wow, my children, I love them so much. It's all right. It's paperweight now.
We can see the presentation.
It's just raining.
Sorry, I might ask, it's been I'm out of practice from COVID, so I might ask you if you can share the screen.
You can see your screen, and so it looks like SD does not have sound. So,
Why don't we go ahead and just, let's see if we can do this.
we can see your presentation.
We'll do old fashioned and hopefully we can share the slide deck with you later. So, good afternoon, counselors. My name is Marcia McGuire and I'm Metro's Waste Prevention and Environmental Services Department Director. And I have here with me S.T. Siegel, she's a principal planner. And we're here today to share an update on our system facilities plan, which is Metro's long-term investment strategy for regional infrastructure with an emphasis on our reuse and recycling investments that are included in it. If you may recall, I think it was this time last spring that I had an opportunity to engage with the council when the plan was in development. This plan is a 20-year roadmap for investing in the region's reuse, recycling, and garbage system. It looks across the full system to identify where services are needed or to be strengthened or expanded. As you know, many people rely on more than curbside recycling service, especially when it comes to materials like household furniture or large bulky items, as well as disposal of household hazardous waste. But access to the services is inconsistent, and those living near a Metro facility have more options than others. This plan focuses on expanding access, improving convenience, and supporting waste reduction, and identifying where more areas of study is needed. There are 4 investment areas in the plan that include community drop-off depots, so it includes building a network of 6 depots for reuse, recycling, and hazardous waste, as well as self-haul garbage services. It also includes organics, investments in the food recovery infrastructure in the region, in addition to reuse and repair, so funding for local reuse and repair businesses and building a regional reuse warehouse, as well as a reuse mall. We have a 10-year conceptual timeline that I will share in the slide deck following this meeting that highlights the phases of the investment. So again, it's a 20-year plan. The first phase of investments focuses on developing the community depot in areas where Metro owns property, so that includes Washington County, as well as developing the concept for the reuse warehouse and launching the Reuse Impact Fund that provides additional funding to local organizations. Some of the investments underway, as I mentioned, this year are advancing recycling and reuse depot planning. So we've initiated the planning, the pre-design planning for Washington County Depot in Cornelius. This will improve access for more than 120,000 residents living in Washington County. We have 2 concepts that our Regional Waste Advisory Committee as well as Metro Council will evaluate for that site. In addition, we launched the Reuse Impact Grant Fund, awarding nearly $1 million to 16 organizations to help expand the region's capacity for repair, reuse, and redistribution of materials. In addition, we've also kicked off a policy project. So as a part of the plan, there are areas that are identified for additional study This policy project is evaluating how the garbage collected from household and businesses is allocated among the transfer stations in the region. It's also going to explore options for how Metro should regulate private transfer stations. This conversation kicked off this fall and will continue through the coming year. Our Regional Waste Advisory Committee is participating in that conversation and will provide input to council on these options. As we look ahead this summer, we will continue to advance the work on the community depot as well as the policy project. We will also be launching a study to evaluate the redevelopment of Metro Transfer Station, and we'll be beginning work on the reuse warehouse concept and sketching out what that planning and scoping looks like. I know when I had the opportunity to engage with your council this last year, there was a lot of interest in the reuse mall as well as the warehouse. We're still early in the implementation phase, and so the timeline for those projects, as I mentioned, are still being developed. We're committed to keeping jurisdictions informed as we move forward with this planning, and I do just want to acknowledge your leadership and momentum in the reuse and sustainability space as an important priority, and we'll continue to engage you as this work moves forward. So we're happy to share any additional information on the reuse warehouse and mall concepts if there's questions. And my apologies that our slide deck, I'm out of practice from the virtual meeting space. And I now have CSD here on the screen.
Thanks, Marta. Just some of the, we're trying to see the connection as we had conversations before, just seeing where Milwaukie could possibly play a role in this, and also like talking about how the reuse warehouse could work and how it's supposed to work, and how grants could potentially support businesses, and what type of businesses would it support. This is kind of attached to our economic development goal conversation, so we're also seeing the sustainability and the business piece kind of come together here.
So I appreciate that question, and so what I would ask is, Asti, do you want to just quickly walk through the brief concepts for the reuse warehouse and the reuse mall, and then we can talk about how we plan to partner with local governments and community partners to advance these.
Sure. Hi, everybody. Sorry, this is Lady Body again. I had to restart there, like often happens. Yeah, I mean, I think, Marta, I didn't get to hear what you said, but I think the reuse warehouse and the reuse mall are concepts that are a couple, and the reuse warehouse, as you can see in the plan, phase one was really assumed to where we begin the reuse warehouse planning. And I think we're set to start some of that this next fiscal year. And then the reuse mall was pushed out to start in phase two, which is early 2030. And that was actually, we were listening to engagement at the end of the plan from our community members who, like a lot of them, really supported the reuse mall concept, but felt like there needed to be a lot more engagement, study, feasibility analysis, and really just talking with partners a lot more to really figure out exactly where it could be, what it is, who the partners would be, how people would have access to it, how much they would pay. So there's just a lot of exciting concept, and there's examples all over Europe and Sweden, and we were excited by it. There's a lot of energy around it. But a lot more needs to be discussed for the mall piece. The warehouse also needs some planning and feasibility. The idea is that to find up to 50,000 square foot space that could hold materials that are still usable life in them, but that there's just an excess quantity coming from various places, hotel industry, office furniture, all sorts of the materials that our reuse partners currently take in the region, but they just don't have the storage capacity. Community warehouse, rebuilding center, and others. And so it would be a partnership. Metro, the concept, although we need to do more feasibility, but the concept could be that Metro acquires an existing vacant warehouse space that's accessible. Finding an accessible place for the whole region is one of the challenges, but that we would hold it, and then we would form partnerships with existing reuse businesses to be able to use space and store materials for reuse and repair. But again, our plan, in the plan is a vision, both of these are visions, and they need a lot more community engagement and feasibility analysis.
And the one thing that I'll just add on in terms of the reuse small, one of the things that came out of engagements that we did and is incorporated into the plan around that concept is first doing a feasibility study and evaluating different approaches that we can take to that there versus having one centralized location for a reuse small versus siting multiple smaller resale reuse spaces. So that feasibility study will really look at those two options and which would be the best path for investment, because we heard a lot of commentary that it would be better to have smaller spaces and having multiple locations versus one large centralized location. In terms of engagement from local governments, we are really hoping to have that engagement as we move this work forward, because we want this vision to be operationalized and shaped by local governments and community partners in the region as we bring options forward for our council consideration. So certainly if this was a priority in the city of Milwaukie, that would be great for Metro to know and to ensure that we're partnering with you as we move this process forward.
I have a question. I'm Robert Massey, I'm the city council, and I'm trying to get a vision of what these places might look like, and I'm kind of struggling to figure out what the footprint of one of these places is. I mean, how much space is needed?
I think that's part of the feasibility study. We had an example of a mall, Rutuna in Sweden, that was a 3,000 square foot space, a much larger space that served as a place for not only for people to sell, retailers to sell reusable items, but also as a community space and retail space. So I think that's one larger option that could be potential. An alternative would be a much smaller space. How do we take advantage of vacant resale spaces where you could create both a space for resale of items as well as spaces for repair? So I think that is something that's not yet shaped what that could look like. I think the possibilities are really endless and need to be tailored to a specific community.
Yeah, that's interesting. When you said 3,000 was one of the larger ones, to me that strikes as actually pretty small.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to.
Actually, I think.
Go ahead.
Maybe
3,000 square meter.
I think it was larger.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, because I'm thinking of the Habitat for Humanity, the use that
okay.
they do, and they're
Yeah.
huge.
I didn't know there was going to be math conversions. So.
Have you guys looked into our industrial area for something like that? We have two.
We're not quite there yet. So like as you mentioned, the system facilities plan is a vision, and our next steps are really to operationalize that vision. So that's taking it down into the planning and feasibility and design. So we're really just at the beginning of this process. So that's definitely a question for us to ask.
Yeah, please.
Kind of get into the scoping of what that would look like.
Well, and I would
I
encourage
know there's a
you,
lot of interest, we've heard other interest about how could you potentially look at coupling a reuse warehouse with a film industry and people that are building sets and, different companies that may be interested in doing film production and arts within the region, and could that be a space that could help encourage that investment as well as house materials that could continue to circulate in our economy. So I think there's a lot of opportunity for us to explore different avenues.
We have Dark Horse.
so I would encourage you to look at the north end of our North Milwaukie industrial area. There's some there's one parcel for sale now, and there's some others that are, I think, underutilized, and they're adjacent to the Tacoma Max station. I guess if you're talking about furniture, people aren't necessarily moving that on the Max, so being Max adjacent isn't is maybe not gonna end up being a goal for this, but,
99 though.
but for smaller things, yeah, it could be.
Yeah, McLaughlin.
Yeah, McLaughlin's a good.
We
Yeah, absolutely.
may be eager, we're not that subtle. I think all of us would love to see something like this happen in Milwaukee. It sounds like you're not there yet. What are the best ways that a city could engage in the process, or as you're describing, more of a community-led process? Where are places that the city could plug in?
In just the way that you are, I think having that contact is super helpful, and you're absolutely on the list, and we'll continue to do broad outreach every time we're moving down the path of developing this study and who we're going to engage. So I recall this conversation, so you've been on our list as an interested party that would be interested in housing this investment. So we will definitely be reaching out to you as we get further down the process. You have that commitment from us, and then we also have regular project updates that we're happy to put a member of your team on to kind of keep pace of how we're doing. I also do monthly local government updates that go out to all the regions that we help highlight where we're at on these projects. So we'll continue to keep you updated on our work, and when we have a more defined project timeline, we'll absolutely reach out. I think it is also really helpful if this is an investment priority and you're working on an economic development plan, when we have those shared goals, that's helpful for us to lift up, to our council to say, hey, there's this opportunity for a shared partnership. This is something, an investment priority for this community. That is always nice to be able to communicate that this is something that you've identified as important for your community.
I would also add that Martha Schrader and Denise McGriff are on the advisory committee.
Yes, Martha Schrader Commissioner Schrader is on the Regional Waste Advisory Committee, so she will be close to this and be engaging in the conversation. So certainly you can also lift up comments to her to share on your behalf at those committee meetings. And then we also always have public comment at those meetings. They meet every fourth Thursday of the month generally, and those agendas are posted on Metro's website.
If no other question, I have a kind of an slightly off-topic question, because it's not really Metro, but I recently, someone approached me who's, I guess, a consultant working under the state's Producer Responsibility Act, and looking to place little mini depots basically shipping containers as little mini depots, and was talking to me about places they might do that around Milwaukee. Do you know anything about that effort and what their timeline is and all of that?
Yes. Sorry, I stopped moving in my energy efficient so the Second Modernization Act is rolling out. As a part of that, it includes both new funding for local governments and service providers for contamination reduction, as well as recycling system improvements. It also includes producers developing new collection points for recycling, primarily plastic and packaging. So though that shipping container, there was one on display at the City of Roses in Portland, but they are looking to place, they are responsible for installing a specific number of collection points to increase access for residents in the metro region. So that work is underway. We have a staff person on the metro team that is staying in tune with that work, and happy to share that contact information. But that is an exciting opportunity if you're looking to put one in Milwaukee. I think any opportunity we have to increase access is a wonderful opportunity. And I had the opportunity to walk through the model, and they look fabulous.
Great. I didn't, this was just a conversation, walking and talking, so I didn't get to see any visuals or anything, but I was definitely encouraging of him to.
Mayor, is the model that people would drop things off there, or that they would exchange things there?
No, I think it's just recycling. It's not like redemption. It's not a
It's a
payment.
hard, it's
not
like a smaller version of the, like the hard to recycle events, the James
Yeah.
recycling events.
Yeah,
Okay.
and they would,
Yes.
they were looking for, to place a shipping container in a place where it would be easy to access trucks that would be coming to unload it and move
Okay.
stuff on, yeah.
We've been in conversation about citing a collection for styrofoam on our property,
Exciting. Oh,
which
nice.
would be central to the area. And I think that they're just trying to figure out the dates and times that would be appropriate for collection at this point, and then we might be able to move forward hopefully by this summer.
Oh, nice.
For
Oh, that's
styrofoam
exciting.
location.
Yeah. Yeah, that's
Is
good.
there a regional recycler now? I've heard that went bust.
Yeah, I had heard that as well, so I can look up the name of
There's a
the
new one?
organization that we're working with.
Okay.
But
That's
my understanding
encouraging.
is that they have new pathways for the hard to recycle materials.
Well, James just had a recycling event at New Seasons on the weekend, and I got there at the very last, I was like one of the last people in the door, and it was very popular. Those events are always pretty well attended, yeah. Yeah. Other questions for Metro?
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for the update.
More than the ESD.
Yeah, we appreciate the time. Like, please don't hesitate to reach out, and we'll continue to keep you updated as we move things forward.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So thanks for listening to the update. We'll stay engaged with them as they continue to make progress on this. See where there's connection points into our economy and also our civil land. With that, thanks, Scott. You get ready. We'll jump into the business registration code updates and a lot of the work that Sierra's been working on internally. And this is going to be not your only bite at the apple, so don't discuss too much.
Because this wasn't in the packet.
Not
the slides.
Not the
No,
slides.
okay.
That's correct.
There were other slides, but yeah.
But this is part of the Economic Development Action Plan, and a lot of your interest, each of you have kind of shared individually and also as a council about kind of reconfiguring the code when it comes to business registration and what that might look like. So Sarah's been doing a lot of prep work to get us going to the next conversation. So take it away.
I'll jump in. Okay, a little bit of background on where this started. Our current business tax is a business tax. It's not a business license. You get a business license for paying the business tax. And it is purely for revenue generation purposes. Some of the issues that we were trying to address through this process are that it's difficult to enforce. There's frequently asked questions that we don't have answers to because it's not spelled out in the code, and just a general lack of clarity. And there's a ton of interpretation happening because of this. So this is to clarify that, as well as we have interest as a city to be more business friendly and to ensure that this is administrative friendly for us and for those who fill out our forms. So a little bit of the timeline we've been on and what we've been doing up until this point and where we're going. We kicked this off in July with an internal meeting, and then we jumped into peer research that fall, which led to the business survey that we went over recently in the winter. We had another round of internal input just last month, and now we're working through proposed changes after we get this round of input here, and that's when we'll come back to you with those proposed changes. But we do want to get some of your priorities and input today, then aiming for a June 2026 adoption. Okay, so jumping into the peer research, these are some of the cities we looked at: Oregon City, Happy Valley, Lake Oswego, Wilsonville, Beaverton, Hillsborough, Gresham, Troutdale, and Sandy. And the things that we looked at were, what are their philosophies around the business license? Is it similar to ours, where it's just revenue generation? What their base fees are and how they scale them, what formulas they use. what exemptions they have in their code, how they handle rental licensing, and then just other things related to questions that we have, such as how they handle multiple businesses, and do they have a revocation clause, and just a few other tidbits like that. So diving right in, the philosophy. So business licensing as an economic development tool is not common. The peers shared the same philosophy that we have spelled out in our code, to the extent of it's either a revenue tool for the general fund, it's an enforcement mechanism, or a cost recuperation for the administrative costs associated with the program. And looking regionally and nationally, the use of the license fees for economic development is rare, which is something that's been in conversation with this group. The more common tools for economic development are typically tax increment financing, construction excise tax, and business or economic improvement districts. So just to give you an idea of what the purpose, how the purpose is spelled out in our code, the current City of Milwaukee, it's only says the business taxes imposed by this chapter are for revenue purposes only. Compared to something like Troutdale's, which goes into a little more in-depth on the reason behind it, promoting health, safety, and welfare, helps us have an inventory of existing businesses, and so on and so forth. And so I know from the survey we had people asking, why do we have a business license? So I feel like keeping it still broad, but leaning towards something like the Troutdale example of saying the reasons why it's helpful to have this, just kind of giving the background behind it could be helpful. So a consideration is maybe to expand that first sentence to say unless otherwise determined by City Council or whoever. And that's just a consideration floating. This isn't a proposal at this time, but still keeping it broad, but also allowing for room for new priorities as have been discussed recently. Okay, fees. Milwaukee has the highest base fee in the metro area. It is 185 base fee. The next highest is 104. So this base fee is meaning the absolute lowest a business could possibly pay for a business license. So this might be a home-based business for some of these, like the $50 one in Happy Valley. The absolute lowest even for a home-based business would be 185 in Milwaukee.
You know, real quick, in 2019, it was $100.
Yeah, when it was adopted, 2018 or so, it was 100, and it was on a whatever.
A rapid
COLA.
scale.
How fast that's
Yeah, seriously.
But I mean, also, just to keep in mind, I mean, the whole thing was, there was a big interest in that period in a tax, right? This fee was where and Bonnie Dennis, who was she was at one point finance director, but this is when she was deputy finance director. So probably 2017, 2018 was tasked with going out and looking at ways we could tax, definitely with a focus on the big businesses, not the small, downtown businesses and home occupations, but a way we could tax businesses. We knew Portland was doing it, which isn't on one of the cities on your list, but that was the genesis of why our fee maybe rose faster than other places, was because we have no tax. And so I guess that's my question. Do any of these cities tax in any other way their businesses?
I didn't really look at that, and I think the business tax in Portland, they don't have a business license fee on top of that business tax. They just have the business tax. Yeah,
Right, but we were told that it's really hard to, there were a lot of reasons why a business tax was seen as not workable, because how do you prove, when you're precision cast parts, how do you prove what you earn from your Milwaukee location versus your 18 other locations around the world?
I'm sorry, they know.
Do they?
They absolutely know.
Yeah.
So I think that conversation has evolved in terms of the data collection portion of things. The software that the city of Portland uses has changed over time, and so the business income tax that's gathered across all of Multnomah County, which includes several of those cities listed, it's gathered and reported through the city of Portland, but under contract with Multnomah County. So Gresham, Troutdale, not necessarily Sandy, But any of the East County cities, there is a tax that's levied on those cities as well. Yeah.
So I
And the
would
data
be-
are available, so if people have, even if it's Subway franchises, you know, that information is better represented now.
Okay.
Is it a surcharge like PSEF or is it something different?
It's a tax based on the level of business that they do.
Like
So it's
sales?
not,
Gross
yeah,
receipts.
yeah, it's on gross receipts, so it's not necessarily like a static recessive tax.
Yeah.
But it's more reflective of the business that they do, which I think is where that conversation really caught a lot of traction, because people were saying, well, if I have, you know, a factory out in Gresham, but my main factory is in Portland and I'm registered in Portland, you know, but you're taxing both locations, why, you know, can you prove that I'm not being double taxed? And I don't think that there was enough of an answer from a data perspective. The quantitative data hadn't really caught up. But I do believe that that conversation is changing now, and that there are better data, and the questions have changed, because the businesses definitely know.
Oh, they know.
Yeah.
Was it tax across the board, or was it,
It's a percentage across the board.
yeah, so it's not
Yeah.
like a big box chain type of thing?
No, and there are levers to, you know, like there are exclusions. And when that tax was increased, most notably, I think 3 or 4 years ago, there was an increase to the ceiling for exemptions. So if there were small businesses that didn't hit a certain level of gross receipts, then those businesses were able to be excluded from the increase, from the tax. If
So
you
I do
wanted-
think that data would be important to this conversation going forward.
To understand if these cities with lower business license fees also have additional
What kind
taxes
of
on them.
revenue they're getting from any other kind of tax. Yeah.
Multnomah County would be able to tell you the revenue that's passed through to Gresham and Troutdale on this list.
Thank you.
We have, I just want to be cognizant of time, and I know this may feel fast, we can go slow and have more of a discussion. But there's a lot of slides, and want just like quick kind of overview to get through, and then we can get into like where do you all think we should end up going?
Okay, continuing on. When it comes to scaling, the city of Milwaukee currently does it by employee count, similar to Beaverton and Gresham. But some businesses use business type and count, business type and income, various formulas of these three factors. That's it for this one. But even when across these scaling formulas, even those different by type, by income, Milwaukee's fee is higher at the start and at the end. I forgot to switch this slide. Here's my own over here. At the start and at the end of the equation. So Milwaukie is that black dotted line. Beaverton is the only one that gets remotely close, and that's because per employee count it's $12, where ours is $10 per employee. So they do start to catch up on that very end of like the 100 employee count.
Sarah, will you remind us whether the employee count is based on full-time employees or any percentage of FTE?
Full-time employees.
So that's in 1 to 60, so
Yeah, sorry, not 60.
that's not showing us for bigger employers where we land.
Correct. I just went up to 60 on this, yeah. 60 plus. Okay. And then just some interesting models when it comes to scaling. As I said with Beaverton, they have an easier entry point of $100 for 0 to 4 employees, but the cost at $12 per employee competes with Milwaukie on the upper end. For Oregon City, they have higher fees for new licenses compared to renewals to recuperate the higher administrative costs associated with a first-time applicant. Sandy charges nonprofits $12, and this nominal fee recuperates some costs, could recuperate some costs associated with lowering the fee. Hillsborough, the cost is higher for new applicants as well. Their renewal is only $25, and they cap charges at 147 employees. The cost per employee is lower for downtown businesses, and they do not charge home-based businesses just an application. And then Wilsonville is the only peer city that uses income, and so business income less than 12,000 is $50 and then $3 per employee at that point, and business income greater than 12,000 is $100 base fee and $3 per employee.
That's annual business income or monthly?
I think annual, yeah. And then less than $500 is waived. When it comes to exemptions, Milwaukie has most of the common exemptions, but there are two that we don't have, where 4 more of the peer cities that I reviewed had these exemptions, just something to consider. They wage workers / employees, just as calling it out as an exemption, and then less than 2 rental units or less is a common exemption among peer cities to be considered.
You mean a landlord who has 2 rental units?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah. When it comes to rental fees, Milwaukie also has the highest base fee in the metro area. So we do not have that exemption for single family rentals or properties with less than 2 units that some of these folks have. But again, the next highest is 105 in Hillsborough. And it follows the same scaling as we do for the business license, which is by employee count, which 4 other peer cities do that as well, where they don't have a separate rental license fee. But those that do, they either do it on a 5-unit count or a flat rate of rentals pay $100, something along those lines.
So I would also encourage you to, so sometime in that same 2018-ish timeframe, Milwaukie went from allowing 4 rental units and not requiring a business license to requiring it for every rental unit. And I don't really remember the reasoning why that was the recommendation, but it was. So I think it would be useful to try and find the staff report from that time that outlines why we made that change.
All right. And then again, some interesting scaling models. We have Beaverton, where the first 40 units are just $100. Each additional unit after that is $180. Gresham used more of a tiered approach, and the cost per unit goes down with the increase in units. Sandy does $85 base fee plus $6 per unit, and Hillsborough does $5 per unit, just starting with a cap at $725.
So that's for, I mean, when you're talking 40 units or 100, you're talking about a major apartment buildings. So it's, I mean, it's likely corporate as opposed to individual owners at that point. Or I mean, I guess our code is agnostic on that too, right? We don't charge Axle Tree different than a mom and pop with 2 rentals. Okay.
Just if Axle Tree has more employees than the
Right.
2 rentals, yeah.
But with regard to Gresham, they also have a business license that landlords are charged, and then the revenue from that, as I understand it, goes back into an inspection program that is funded through so the revenue that they receive from these individual units goes into a rental inspection program that is self-funding. That doesn't necessarily just go directly back into their general fund or into an economic development fund.
Okay, and then getting into the business survey.
Can we just hold on for just a second? I think this is a good exercise. And the way I see this is that there's 2 components of this, and that I think the business license can be an issue, especially for small businesses. But I will tell you, if you look at even a medium-sized or up business, when you look at these costs, I ask myself, would a business make a decision not to locate in Milwaukie if they didn't, if they didn't have to pay, this business license? And I gotta tell you, the cost of real estate and insurance and equipment and everything like that dwarfs these. And so I just kind of doubt that swings the needle in either direction for medium and large companies like in the industrial areas and that kind of thing.
I agree with you.
Okay. Business survey. This is just more of a reminder, but the findings from that related to the business license were that the fee should be scaled. That's what businesses ask for, and they think that scaling should be based on a combination of factors, not just employee count. And they think the current registration platform is good. Some of the other sentiments that came out in that survey was a request to keep it simple. So if they have to show a bunch of paperwork to prove something, not necessarily what they're wanting, as well as that piece that I talked about earlier, clarifying why they're paying something in the first place, and then request to reduce the cost or add exemptions for single-family rentals or long-term rentals and home-based businesses. And then there was the starting of the discussion of how we reinvest this revenue into potentially programs to support businesses.
Are there any suggestions about what other factors could be used to look at scaling besides just employee count?
From the survey
Yeah.
specifically? Yes, so it was, do you want it to be based on employee count or income or type or a combination of the above? And so most people selected a combination of the above, so I can't remember what the exact breakdown of the other three were though.
When you say type, what do you mean there?
Like home-based business versus
Retail.
Yeah.
Restaurant.
Okay, and then just getting into the internal input from our staff members. So currently this tool is used as a revenue tool, an outreach tool, and a data tool. But there are some other considerations of if we want to look at this as more of a business license versus registration. Is this an enforcement mechanism, a resilience mechanism, an economic development tool, as well as a private versus public registration? Beaverton and Oregon City residents have the ability to look up registered businesses, and I've heard a request from that from our local businesses to do that. So we're exploring adding a little opt-in into the next year's renewal process.
I'm sorry, can you elaborate on that a little bit?
For the registration, for the
Yeah.
public registration? Yeah, so if there's a business registered for their city, so if they're in Beaverton and they opt in, I'm assuming it's an opt-in process there, to be on this public listing of businesses, you could just search if you want to find like a service in the city that you want to use to keep. The request for ours is to keep services local and help create partnerships and collaboration opportunities between businesses here. Yeah, it doesn't give a whole bunch of information. It's more like contact, address, are they registered here or not? It's not giving all of their information from the business.
So, yeah, I mean, I feel like I've seen a list and that there's a lot of them who have opted out. So we don't have to make under state law, we don't have to make that list public record.
Well,
I think if someone requested
Yeah,
it, we
folks,
would, but we wouldn't, we don't have to proactively publish it.
and the truth is, like, Google what's near me is probably more effective than this.
I mean, I mean, the thing I've always wanted from it is email addresses, and
Yeah.
it's a pretty poor tool for getting email addresses in my experience, yeah. So talk about resilience mechanism.
Yeah, basically having the contact information for emergency situations.
So that was, I can't remember if you guys were here when this whole thing kind
Right
of
when
blew
I
up with the
started.
farmer's market.
It was the
Yeah.
day I started.
And I hadn't thought about it that way, but that was definitely the former city manager's concern, was that, you know?
If there's a
Boil water notice, I need to
Right.
be able to contact people
Right.
quickly.
So then the question here, rhetorical question is, are there other goals and purposes this code should be brought into include?
What kind of enforcement are we talking about?
Well, there has been requests of if we can use this as a way to, people start operating their business without having their certificate of occupancy or anything, there might be anything similar to that. And so can we withhold the business license? Can we revoke the business license to help enforcing other things? The internal input is that we're not wanting to go that direction.
That's a pretty good example. I can buy into that one, but when I think about enforcement, I go like, you know, we're not gonna get into labor law, we're not gonna get into health and safety, we're, you know.
It's supposed to be a renewal.
Okay.
I mean, when a business is renewing or doesn't choose to renew and they're already in business, what are we gonna do? Obviously, we can keep asking them, but we're gonna
So we
close them
don't,
down?
We don't use code
them.
enforcement to
We
go
do.
out?
We
Oh,
do,
okay.
but
We
we
do.
do that primarily for enforcing the revenue
Yeah.
generating piece of this, not, you know, as a, you're uncompliant with other things, and so we're going to revoke your business license. It's-
Okay, I'm okay with those answers as long as enforcement is narrowly defined, because I just saw that enforcement is going like, that could be a bag of worms.
Yeah.
Well,
I think it also makes sense to highlight the available funds that are the funds that are available to businesses, and that by not renewing your business license, you could then be ineligible for those pots of funds.
Sure.
So perhaps that can be made clear, you know, in addition to code enforcement.
Yeah, there's no fine,
There could be, I mean, if you're,
well, there should be.
yeah.
But eligibility for the grant programs and
Yeah,
technical assistance is a
that and the
requirement to
phone.
have a business license in the city of Milwaukee.
Yeah.
So if you don't have one, then you don't have access to urban renewal funds, and you don't have access to hubs funding or pre-development funding.
How does, I don't know, I don't understand how you can operate without a business license. So like how do we not just say, hey, you gotta do we not have the staff or that's the admin lift that I'm guessing?
Well, so it depends, it's partly it's philosophy.
Because if that's the case, I mean, right, like it just,
If you have a business that
Enforcement's
doesn't
weak.
renew and it's still in operation, you know, how hard do you want to come down? Do you want to work with that business? That's kind of been our role, or the way our philosophy was to work with them and try to get them into compliance. So after a couple of months, they hopefully they paid their renewal fee. But yeah, at some point, what if they say no, or ignore you, ghost you, then you start adding citations, fine violations. And what's the escalation process if they just keep operating without one? You know?
well, I guess it would help to understand why they're not paying in the first place. So if it's because of bad month of business or
Right.
low funds, I mean, that's different.
Absolutely.
But if it's just a, middle finger to the city,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. We do
So,
take that into consideration.
I guess that information's
Yes.
important. That's probably
Added
better
to
information.
what's going on is certainly something we try to.
Is this a prevalent problem, or is this a handful of businesses aren't?
No, we've gotten better, I think, with renewals. I'm looking at our finance director, just because,
I'd say the challenge right now is it's very hard to separate our rental from what you would think of as a business. And so, I mean, I'm maybe talking nonsense, but I think
Gotten better.
enforcement has been a time-consuming endeavor for the city, actually, and we've definitely been looking at that through the prism of your economic development goal, and where the right, focus for code enforcement should be, as we are doing this business code update. But, I think a lot of it is, okay, I have to log into an online system and pay this, and I don't know how to do that. So I have to come down to City Hall and work with the administrative assistant to log on. It's stuff like that rather than people trying to game the system. Some of it is,
The renewals have gotten better
Yeah.
since we have updated the system and made it kind of automatic.
We sent out roughly 1,700 renewals, and I think we're at 1,300 to 1,400 that have already renewed. So we sent out a letter at the beginning of the month, just as a reminder to everybody. That's been pretty good.
Yeah, and a lot of folks that have had the registration are vendors that were here for a second and are no longer here, so we
Yeah.
won't hear from them. But yeah, we do try to work with folks, and depending on how that goes, ratchet up compliance and enforcement.
Going to go through these quickly. The compliance piece from internal folks is just that enforcement is difficult. We don't want to be adding a revocation clause or in the business of doing additional policing around this for administrative ease and other reasons. And a part of this, the internal requests were to clarify whether Uber drivers need to pay, clarify whether exempt entities need to still register even if they're not paying, such as our nonprofits, and clarify who administers or add flexibility with or designee language.
and just to clarify on that, like back to the example the mayor shared about the farmer's market, the way the code is written right now, anyone who sells any good or service in the city would have to get that. That's where this idea of vendors that pop-up markets, by the way the code is written, should be in there. We had to carve out an exemption, but the Uber driver or any gig economy person, by my interpretation of the code, would apply. I don't believe that we have a business license for every gig economy worker in Milwaukee, and I don't think we ever will.
Well, to me,
If you would like to figure out an enforcement mechanism for that, I'd love to hear.
well, to
Chase him
me-
down. Hey,
Pull all the Uber drivers over.
yeah, right? Give me your $2.
To me, the shared ride share and the DoorDash, but also the scooters and the e-bikes are a place where I think as a metro area, we really dropped the ball and we let Portland drive the train, and Portland sets the policy and we all just have to live with it. And Portland collects taxes, I believe, from ride share. None of the rest of us are able to do that, but Portland gets to do that. And it should have been a regional approach to all of that. We should have a revolt.
Yeah, I'm with you.
We should dig into that a little bit more, because I think Gresham was able to piggyback on
There's
Portland's earlier and lift tax, so I can call my T-Bot buddies and see
We'll
what's
talk to
going
your
on.
people.
They haven't put your number on the block yet?
They want me to testify tomorrow.
burner phones.
Okay, when it comes to rentals, the internal input was they support separating business license from the rental license and support a per unit fee structure, as well as exemptions for 1 or 2 unit long-term rentals.
One important caveat to what I mentioned about Gresham's program, and I sent you information about that, Sarah, is that if someone has a rental housing license, they pay that in lieu of the annual business license. And that is the revenue that funds the housing inspection program. So I want to be very clear that it's not my understanding that they pay both of those. They pay a separate fee that takes the place of the business license.
And that inspection, that money going to inspection, that's not just about short-term rentals, that's just sort of all property.
Yeah, it's for the quality of housing, and they inspect the quality and the condition of the housing for health and human safety.
And all rental housing.
I believe so.
Okay, awesome, good for
Yeah,
them.
I don't know the specifics around short-term housing, so I don't know if there is a different type of enforcement or inspection program for that. I could look into it.
Okay, and then we just had some frequently asked questions from the internal staff on FTE. Is it based on full-time employee? This just needs to be clarified in the application. It's clear in the code. Is it based on employees working in Milwaukie only? We are leaning towards saying yes to that. The Beaverton code spells out that that's the way it is there, but most other codes are a little ambiguous. And then what time of the year are we basing FTE on? It's clear in the code, but not in the application per se, so we can clarify that in the application. Okay, so the synthesis is that based on internal input, the business input, and Peer Cities there is changes under consideration of lowering the base fee for small businesses and home-based businesses, and considering nonprofit, COVID, and less than 2 units exempt, as well as scaling the housing fee based on unit count and add an opt-in to the form for the public listing of businesses potentially under consideration. And then other just code changes under consideration is changing finance director and city manager, or adding or designee, change the purpose to broaden it for future flexibility, clarify some of the exemptions, whether a nonprofit still needs to register or if they're just exempt all around, add exemptions such as the single family rentals, and clarify information management. Right now, it says we keep their information confidential, so what does that mean in practice and for how we use it as a city and use this as an economic development tool. And then just right size the penalties and enforcement language to match what we're doing in practice, match reasonability and business friendliness standards. Okay, so this part is where I would like to get the council's input. Just to give you some context, the business tax rate is between $350,000 and $385,000 each year for the general fund. For 2027, when we're looking at doing some sort of reduction, Michael has reduced the anticipated budget to $325K in anticipation of a reduction. But with that said, for the business license, I would like to know if the council, what the council prioritizes between these options or another option that is not here that you might come up with. Is maintaining revenue the priority? Is reducing costs equitably the priority, or reducing costs broadly, or increasing value by diverting funds for business support? And I wanted to just say, reducing costs equitably, there's two models that could be in place there, which is to maintain the existing fund, existing revenue, or reduce it if we have people at the lower end of the paying spectrum paying less, and those at the higher end, larger businesses paying more. There's that opportunity there too.
You know, I think we should, the scaling is great. But I really think, obviously revenue is important, but I think that's the least of the priorities, in my opinion, of the three, or four, excuse me. I think one of the most important ones is increasing value. Because reducing costs is great, but if, and I don't know if we can do both, reduce the cost a little bit, or maybe divert a percentage of the licensed funds, because I think what would be more helpful for a business is in economic downturns, bad months, where people may have to, you know, dig a little deeper to pay some of those bills. I mean, it would be nice to have some sort of revolving fund for a rainy day for businesses who are slump, in a slump, maybe for that month. I remember, like, for example, Stronger Skate Park. They were hanging on a thread. You know, a few businesses were hanging by a thread after COVID. Just some of the economic downturns that we've had. So if there was if there was a portion of that funds that went into something like that, and I don't think it'd have to be a lot, because you're talking about like just some monthly bills that some of these businesses would need to pay, like their rent, which is going to continue to go up. Some of the costs of whatever it is, their water, their whatever it may cost them to do. Like we have the grants, but that doesn't cover operation and keeping the business afloat. So I think anything that increases value to our businesses and supports our businesses is I'm all for that. Reducing costs, great, but I think the scaling will take care of that naturally, I'm hoping, right, for the smaller businesses. But I do think that business support is the key.
Are there any elements of business support, and unlike what Adam mentioned, I'm thinking more along the lines of economic business support. Is there any element of business support that exists like in the general fund that we could just shift from general fund to this? Nothing?
Not really, no. I
Okay.
can think of, but.
I thought that was the answer. Okay. I was looking for an elegant solution.
Yeah.
And
Sorry.
there's not one.
I appreciate that.
But
Two birds with one stone. I like it.
Structural solution, you know, this is a fee that you pay once annually. But maybe there's a way that we can set that up so that you pay the fee, you know, in 2 payments or in 4 payments or something like that. That makes it a little bit more manageable, so that when you're thinking about that annual amount, but you also have rent and utilities and payroll and all of these other things, paying 1/4 of that quarterly sounds a whole lot better than paying the full amount, especially during a period of time that might be a little less of an economic, you know, because when this comes due, hey, excuse me, what are you doing? Stop that. When this comes due, it's also when a lot of other bills come due. And so like maybe we can just offer that as a structural change. I don't know what the implementation costs for that would be, but like a payment plan.
Happy to talk to our finance folks about what that might look like. Yeah.
I'm certainly open to this idea, but it's, you know, I don't want to jump ahead to the next topic, but it also starts to strike me as being a lot of administration if we were in that situation.
Yeah, or there's probably, I don't know, Michael's here, so maybe I'm getting out ahead of my skis, but I mean, isn't it just a software thing where we have quarterly bills?
I would think that's
Quarterly
something
payments, it's a
software
payment
could do.
plan that
We'll chat.
any financial software should be able to put in place.
Yeah, well, I wish, send out all of our softwares amazing, but happy to, this is a good time to share what you're thinking, your values around this, and we can explore more and provide it. So, from what I'm hearing so far, from Councilor Body, it sounds like you're kind of talking about a fund similar to what we did during COVID.
Yeah, exactly.
Councilor Stafford, it sounds like you're hearing flexibility.
Right.
So I like the idea of scaling it or creating exemptions, if that's, the better way to think about it, for the smallest businesses and, or based on income or, whatever. I don't think we need, I would not be a fan of reducing the revenue. I would be a fan of increasing the revenue. And I think we need to know more about the taxing situation in other cities. Since, yeah, I think we have, as Councilor Massey said, your medium and large size businesses are not making a decision on the $10 per employee it's costing them to put their a year to put their employees in Milwaukie. On the business support, I mean, I do like the idea of a rainy day fund. I also like the idea of offering more training things. Like there was recently this thing that was done at the Metro Regional Innovation Hub at Good Measure. We used to do more of that when Alma Flores was here. She brought in
SBA, SBDC.
and MISO, and actually it was, who are the ones? Anyway, she brought in several different groups that did trainings, did business development, incubation kind of trainings. I mean, I could see using funds, if we raised enough funds, having, using it towards a business incubator kind of a thing. I think there's a bigger discussion here than we resolve before this budget goes
Totally.
in.
And I think the business survey is this, right, Sierra, the top things, the business community said they wanted to see it go towards were marketing and tourism, training, and then some assistance funds,
Yeah. I also, I mean, I do feel like the exempting people who own just a few properties may make sense, just from an sort of a staff enforcement. Although I do like what you're saying about Gresham. I do worry that we don't inspect our rentals, right? We got people with 40-year-old, 50-year-old, 60-year-old rental properties that they're renting out, and how safe are they? So, I mean, I think there's some hard conversations to be had here, actually.
Yeah.
I'll echo the mayor's concerns. I gather from how you answered Councilor Massey's question, we're not supplanting other funds if we're adding value to businesses. So that decrease in revenue is more than just 25,000. It's all the funds that we then redirect to business support. And I think that digging ourselves further into the financial hole that we're going to be in as a city is not a good spot to be. And Eugene is exploring their own version of PISA. In Portland, that's brought in a lot of money. Councilor Stavanger talked about, there are other ways that we can get at taxing businesses now as our software and data gets better and better. And I don't know if this is the best way to do it, but I do think making the largest businesses that are operating in our community pay a little bit more to make sure that whatever we do is revenue neutral or additive to our revenue to help us to get out of this hole.
Well, just to correct, I wouldn't say put all the revenue generated, just a portion of it. I mean, if you just had, he already reduced it by, what, he reduced it by 25,000? I mean, just having something sitting there, business is gonna cost, none of the smaller businesses that we're looking to support is gonna have a $25,000 bill at the end of the month that they're gonna come to the city with, It's more for smaller, your rent, your $1,500, your utility usage, your, a minor repair that your landlord's not gonna cover, because not all landlords are good people, so.
And I think to that, having a matrix of what are the options that we could do for supports, what are the, having something built out that we can then run by and engage our business community and to see what they would like once it's a little bit more fleshed out would be really nice.
To that point, I would actually recommend that if there is a consensus to use some of the registration funds or tax, however we're gonna move towards, to support businesses, we can literally, we don't have to necessarily codify exactly what that looks like. We could also say that, 25% or this portion of these funds are used for economic development activities, and then we can have another discussion about what that, have the flexibility to address what that means every year or two.
Yeah.
Because it could be different, needs could change. So I would say like, we don't need to figure out all the
Specifics, right, yeah.
But
That's good.
more of the fact that you
It's
want to
there.
use a piece of this to actually go back into economic development.
So to that end, I think that you might find more definition to the responses to the survey every year if you have a transparent accounting of where that money goes and how it benefits businesses in the city. If businesses can see where their registration fee goes and how they are benefiting from that, then they're, I would imagine, more likely to be proponents of this program versus seeing a fee that increases over time and you don't know exactly how that plugs back in to what you get from the city.
Because it kind of does it right now, yeah. I mean, it does,
Well,
but they don't like
It
you
does,
said.
but it's hard to quantify.
You see it goes to the general fund, right? You don't know where
Right.
it goes from there.
There are a lot of things that do benefit businesses in the city, and there's a lot of decisions and policies that we've made, but the crosswalk between the fee and those outcomes is not very clear.
Yeah.
We can do a better job of being fully transparent in how this supports businesses, and then they see what their return on investment
Yes,
is.
that's a good point, yeah.
I know Emma, you have a topic that you're gonna talk about, so I want to be responsible about that, but also I want to leave this slide with some consensus or at least understanding. So just from what I'm hearing, if this is true, let me know. It sounds like consensus, scaling, and providing value back to the businesses is an important piece for, I see some heads nodding. I also heard not necessarily a consensus around wanting to maintain or lose, or it sounds like the consensus is to maintain or potentially increase funds here. That's what I'm hearing as well. From the consensus.
Well, I mean, what do you mean increase funds? Like, the only way to do that is, well, what does, I guess so. with
As
the
we figure out
scaling,
like the
yeah.
scaling piece,
If you mean increase funds as in like make bigger companies pay more, then yes.
basically mean like we're making $375 a year on this tool. We want to make sure we at least maintain that as we figure out the skills in the six.
As much as we can.
Yeah. Okay. Great.
Okay.
I feel pretty good.
Yeah, that's enough input for this. We'll come back again here in the next couple months. But I will emphasize that administrative ease, I think I skipped over that slide, will be a really important criteria as we decide what to do. And so you probably see that in the next update.
What a lovely segue into the next topic.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Sorry, that's all a little rushed, but you got through some good.
Thanks, you guys. All right, and we'll turn it over to Emma to talk about city-funded grants.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm doing fancy technology and casting direct from my computer. Well, thank you, folks, for giving me some time. We've got 45 minutes, and I envision this really as much a discussion and actually a workshop item as possible. If you have your phone or your laptop available, we're going to be using that tool that I love, Menti, where I ask you for some anonymous input. So just be prepared when we get there. But just a couple slides to frame things up. Why this conversation? Why now? I actually hatched the idea for this conversation when I met with Joseph in the middle of my parental leave, and we were talking about grants. And a couple things dawned on me. The first is that there's been a proliferation of city-funded grant or grant-like programs over the last biennium. And that's really exciting. I think this kind of reflects a philosophy of this council that maybe we haven't even put name to, but that, you guys see the benefit in capacitating our partners, be they businesses, be they nonprofits, be they just residents, who have cool ideas and cool expertise to get things done that advance your policy goals. We have 160 awesome staff, but those people can only do so much. With city resources given out through grants, we might be able to augment what we're able to accomplish. And so just to show you what I mean when I say proliferation of grant programs, this list, and this was in your staff report, shows things that really, with the exception of the neighborhood enhancement program, Scott, is there any way to make this bigger on the screen? Maybe like,
Bigger?
let me close the participants
It's like bigger.
side and make the thing bigger. If you close the side column where the participants are, I think that will, wow. Yeah.
Should have slide that, how come it's not taking up the whole screen?
I don't know, it might be because I'm sharing it from my computer, but.
Usually the stuff at the top is just over some of it.
Yeah, it might be where the gallery is showing up, Scott, if that can move.
Or the transcription can
Yeah.
get closed. That's better.
Oh, hey.
Better.
That's better. Okay.
Okay, I'm gonna keep going, but with the exception of the Milwaukie Neighborhood Enhancement Program, which is a fancy way of saying our NDA grant program, everything else in there is really in the last biennium, things that we've created to support various goals. And through the onset of these grant programs, we've learned a ton. We've learned that to do them well, you actually need to spend a lot of time on the front end, which sometimes isn't what we want to do, and we have an idea and we've got some money, we want to get it out there, we want to move fast. We've been burned maybe a few times, but on the other hand, you don't want to just sit on an idea for so long and kind of bureaucratize it to death. And even when you do great, careful pre-planning, once you roll a project out, you always learn something. The first few applicants through the door are always the guinea pigs. They get frustrated because we don't have all the answers, but we learn a lot and we improve. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about this in a second, but I think this is kind of a Captain Obvious statement, but the rigor of reporting requirements, the amount of sort of rigidity you have in controlling what the outcomes are going to increase your staff time. So if we can kind of be a little more risk comfortable and okay with kind of what will be, it's going to take less staff time. But if you really want to ensure those dollars are delivering exactly what people said and they're reporting on it, that's going to take more staff time. And then we'll get into this a little bit more too, but several of these programs have the ability to give money to non-city groups to do work on city property. This is kind of a new dynamic for Milwaukie. And that has frankly been where we hit the biggest snags. Because we hold ourselves to really high standards on our property, and we have to be pretty risk averse on our own property because the insurance comes back to us. And it's like you rented out your home to someone to do something. So that's where the complexity and frankly the staff time is getting to be the most. So we know you guys have wanted these efforts, all those bullets on that last slide. I feel like I can point to the exact meeting where you gave us the direction. But what I think has remained a little unclear and why I wanted to put this on a work session is just one, have I made you aware of sort of the administrative workload and cost behind these, especially as we go into budget season? And are we putting the right amount of staff time to them? Am I putting too little, too much, the right amount? Kind of, are we meeting the mark, or are we approaching this not in alignment with where you'd like us to? So today, I just want to daylight some experience of all those existing programs, gauge your opinions on some broad questions, but really identify topics for diving further, especially with our truncated time. We're not going to solve anything today. I think we're going to unearth a lot of interesting things and places to go deeper. And I really want to stress this is not the time to nitpick individual programs. Why does Joseph's application on page 7 say this? That's not what we're doing today. This is more of a philosophical, kind of global, holistic conversation. Okay. I'm going to just give you a couple case studies because you might hear me say things like light lift or high lift or heavy lift. And I want to kind of I attempted to quantify this and then I had to kind of walk that back, but kind of give you some real world examples of what I mean when I say light lift, moderate lift, and heavy lift. So all these grant or grant-like programs have various elements to them. You have to set up the program, you have to kind of decide what the policies are gonna be around it, then you have to make the application, then you have to make sure people know about that application, accept applications, review them, and decide who you're gonna give money to. You have to actually get the money out the door, and then you have to decide if you're gonna make people report on what they've done. I'm not gonna go through each of these, but like just to give a couple examples, I'd say a light lift on a program setup is something where it's like, the policy is super clear. It affects one department, they know exactly what the goals are, so there's no like lots of community conversation or council conversation, you just know it. On the flip side, a heavy lift would be, I think we know, but we really gotta go engage people, and this policy document and this policy document are in conflict, so we're trying to wade through those. On project solicitation and review, if it's as easy as we put it up on social media for a couple weeks and put it in the pilot, that's light lift. Heavy lift is it's a program that's pretty bespoke, so we have to go and talk to applicants and educate them, and there's a lot of back and forth as people are trying to figure it out, and there's a lot of hand holding through the process. Some of these grant programs, we're working with an established committee like the ESC or the PSAC. Those are kind of moderate lift ones. It's great, we've got other people involved who help us score things. But you guys know, you gotta herd cats. So you send them your scoring matrix, then you remind them 5 times, then you nudge them even more, then you amalgamate all their scores. There's still some administrative load. So I'm happy to share more, but just when I say things like light lift, moderate lift, and heavy lift, these are kind of the categories through which I'm assessing that. So I'm just gonna run through 3 kind of case studies, and then we're gonna get to the mentee. So I wanna give you kind of an example of this is the MCEF, the Milwaukie Community Events Fund. Created this when we realized you guys want to see more events, and the city can't really put on that many more events. We're a little bit tapped out. But what we could do is give a couple $1,000s to some community partners. This one, pretty much across the board, I put in the light lift category. It was very clear what we were trying to do. The application was very simple. It's a moderate lift on the project solicitation because we're working with ESC and we're trying to kind of, coach them through it. But once it's done, it's 1 meeting or it's 2 meetings a year, we're done. Issuance of funds, finance is great, they cut the check. And the thing you need to know about this program is we cut the check and we say, please send us photos and tell us what happened. But that's it, the check is cut. And I'd say we have maybe a 50 to 60% success rate on getting photos back and stories back. But some of them, it just doesn't happen, and we don't really have a mechanism to claw that money back. We're talking very small amounts of money, so the risk has kind of been low, but we haven't been spending a ton of staff time chasing this stuff up.
Well, and those events a lot of them have not been very open to the public, or have not been made, the public has not been made known that they are open to the public.
Right, exactly. But also we've kind of chosen to put not a ton, I guess, of staff time on the enforcement or the follow-up, partly because of the dollar amount.
May I ask a clarifying, actually 2 clarifying questions. One, I don't know yet, but I hope that you're able to distinguish whether these case studies are going to be financial advance versus financial reimbursement, because those 2 things
are different.
And then secondly, is there an internal policy or practice in which a grantee that is receiving city funds also receives a boost of PR outreach awareness to the same degree that we would also share something that we are voting on?
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm not going to dive into that level of detail today, but like for this one, for example, I think these are all pre-funds. Okay. So it's not reimbursement, lowest administrative lift, highest risk that we might not get the outcome we want. Also on this one though, I think because of all those kind of light things, we have not been giving it a ton of PR support. Whereas some of the examples I'll give down the road are a little more like, we've invested some deep skin in this, so we have a vested interest in seeing it be successful.
Okay. I think it's helpful to highlight that and also be reflective as to where a small boost in something that's in kind for us can also go a lot further in meeting some of those outreach and dissemination
Yeah.
challenges.
Absolutely. And we'll have some opportunities in the mentee for you to give
Okay.
feedback like that.
Just to clarify, so it's not, when you say we're not getting what we want out of it, does that, it's not like we're cutting these checks and then the event's not happening, right? Because it's
I
still,
think in one or two cases that has happened. But
and then what's happened to the funds?
the check has been written and we follow up and we ask and someone's like, oh, sorry, this came up, so we're rescheduling it for this month, and we try, but we've made the decision in terms of how to administrate, this is one example, to be pretty hands-off. Because if it's going to be, here's the application, you have to do the event, submit reimbursement checks, we have to, it's just a higher level of oversight.
So do we have any mechanism to get the funds back? I mean, that's taxpayer funds.
Yeah, I'm gonna hold conversation until we get to the mentee, because this is exactly the feedback I need to get. So sort of an example too would be sort of our business improvement grants. I picked random one, storefront improvement. Big heavy lift on the program setup. This was a lot of money. This was the URA. This was really, making sure we went and looked at all of our I's dotted, T's crossed. Heavy lift on the application development. But then, it's an ongoing program, and once the sort of scaffolding was built up, Sierra and Joseph kind of spent a moderate lift on those things coming in. It's part of their daily workload, but it's not, oh my gosh, a really intense period at one time. Issuance of funds, I believe these are reimbursement grants, but they're reimbursement at kind of intervals, and so there's some moderate level of lift and coordination between our finance team and our economic development team. And then quarterly reports, is that right, Joseph? Quarterly reports, so a moderate lift there.
So when you say it's reimbursed at intervals, you mean if you've spent the 10,000 to match, you get 10,000 and the rest comes later? It's not all dispersed in one fell swoop?
We've done both based on what the business's needs were and whether they had done some work previously and wanted funds to account for it, but yeah.
Mm-hmm. And then this one is a little bit in the works still, but I'll take the Good Neighbor Grant as a program that the program set up and the application development were kind of on the moderate side because we were trying to learn from our business improvement grants and model it as much as possible on that. That was great, that saved some staff time. What we're finding is because Good Neighbor opportunities are seem to be so heavily weighted on public property, it's becoming quite a heavy lift to work with applicants and understand what could be possible as they try to do these projects on city-owned land, because we might have policy frameworks or conflicting policy guidelines or unclear policy guidelines. We've got, insurance questions we've kind of never had to grapple with because we've never had external entities doing stuff. So it's become a heavier lift on that. Moderate lift, we think, on the issuance of funds because of what we've learned from the business improvement grants. And then reporting, I think, is going to be kind of TBD on that piece. So I'm going to ask you to get your phone out and scan this QR code. And then I'm going to switch us over once I see everyone's kind of in there and weighing in. Now these questions, you're going to get mad at me because they're too black and white and you're like, but I have a nuanced answer, but I'm going to force you to give me an answer because then we're going to have some conversation about it. Okay. Everyone got the QR code?
Audience participate too?
No.
You want us to go ahead?
Yes,
Are
please
you're
answer
not
the
putting
question.
the questions up there?
I'm
Okay.
going to, but
Okay. You want us to
question
just keep
changed.
going through?
Is it putting them all up to you at the same time?
No, it's
one,
rolling, and then
now
I
it's-
switched it, but before I answered the last one.
That's okay. Okay, I should give you another
Your
chance.
answer didn't matter that much.
I didn't answer that.
Okay. Everyone answered the first one?
I don't know.
It's mine. Which one's the first one?
The first one was how supportive we
Oh, no, I didn't answer that.
Generally,
I
do you
didn't-
believe the city should be more or less involved in administering grant and grant-like programs?
That was the first one?
That was
Oh.
the first one. Was
Oh.
that?
I had one before
Well, then I
that.
had one
We
before
answered
as
slightly
well.
differently.
Okay. Answer. It says I have 4 of 8 on the generally do you believe?
I
5 of 8.
Who
I
are,
don't know who the 8 are.
who are
I'm one of
they?
them. I voted because this
Public.
guy said I should.
The many public.
Are you voting? No,
Last time I'm listening to you tell me to vote.
Okay, this isn't working perfectly, but I have 5 responses. I'm gonna show them to you and you can tell me if yours is not reflected here. So the question was, do you believe the city should be more or less involved in this business, in administering grant and grant-like programs? The scale got is much more involved, somewhat more involved, about the same, somewhat less involved, and much less involved. And I think the distribution is interesting. So it looks like I got a small majority saying that you'd actually have to see even more than what we're doing now. Couple in the about the same, and 1 saying much less involved. So I want to stop here and let you guys talk to each other about your answers and responses on this question.
Well, I was one of the somewhat more involved, and that was only because of finding out that we might be losing funds to things that aren't happening, and I'm concerned about that because these are taxpayer funds.
Well, I was gonna say, I think the question could be read 2 different
Sure.
ways. So is saying the city should be more involved, meaning we should have more programs? Or is it saying the city staff should be
More.
playing, pinning down more of those kind of details?
Yeah, but it said administering the grant.
Yeah, this is my bad. This is post baby brain, not communicating well. This was really, do you think we should have more or less of these programs?
Okay.
Do you think we should
Oh.
be more or less in the business of giving grants?
Oh, I'm
Oh.
shifting
That
those.
changes,
We'll talk
yeah.
about it. Okay. Tell me, let's go around the table and say what your vote would be in the, should we do more or less
No more
of
secret
grants?
ballot.
No more secret ballot.
I don't think we should do less.
You don't think we should do less, okay?
I would say it was somewhat more involved, as long as the staff capacity's there.
So the question again is, more programs?
Should we do more of this kind of business?
No, I don't think so. I think that we're pretty much stretched as it is, although, it's not that I'm against other programs or other grants, it's just that, it's a realization that, we have a financial issue, and, administering these grants it's down to a financial issue. It's down to staff time, and that kind of thing. So, although I might want a program, I think that I just have to, take an appetite suppressant and say, we can do what we can afford.
Is this an answer or a soliloquy? Just joking. No,
He
can we-
doesn't
can
speak
we
that much. You
quantify
give
our
him the words
answer?
he wants.
I yield.
Can we quantify our answer? I think that we have a very involved community. I think that they know a lot about the shared values of what it means to do these types of events and this type of system bending. So I like that we've been flexible and that we've been nimble about this type of funding. I'm not opposed to doing more of that. As long as the guidelines are put in place that are very clear in this pseudo-governmental relationship, that those that are doing work on behalf of the city with city funds have to follow some of the same guidelines that the city does with regard to transparency of public funding, with regard to carrying the same type of liability awareness that a public agency has to have. So I think that we've learned a lot. We've learned enough to be able to change our systems and make the process even easier and more clear. And I think that says a lot about the staff that are administering the programs and then the community partners that are participating. So it's been I feel like it's been a good pilot. I'm not in favor of reducing it.
Okay.
Good soliloquy.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Council President?
You put up a list of programs, and like a lot of people were saying here, I would feel really upset if any of those programs got slashed.
Okay.
There are areas where, I've heard a lot from our business community about marketing, promotion, and supporting events. I don't think those things have to be, it could be increasing our sponsorships for events or other things. Knowing that we have budget constraints, I think it has to fit in our overall budget strategy, but I'm not opposed to supporting ways that our community is going above and beyond. I think that we've got a lot of really, like Councilor Sedgwick said, a lot of really enthusiastic community members, and the extent to which the city, that doesn't always have the admin capacity, can amplify the work that our community is already doing, I'm really happy about. Seeing some of these examples, I think to make sure that we're able to maximize our impact, I am worried less about the administration afterwards, or the city closely tracking the impacts of every single thing. I'm worried more about the front end work that we can do to make sure that the criteria we set on these grants is appropriate, that the systems for selecting recipients is well done. I'll give an example on our SPOT program. I don't really care if the rapid flashing beacon has reduced speeds or made it easier to cross. I care that we were responsive to the community, that we had a process to choose which projects we think are best. But the city trying to quantify the impact of what we did, that is admin that in a perfect world, we would have the capacity to do. But I would care much more that those dollars are spent to amplifying our impact than on crossing our I's and dotting our T's.
We'll use a different example, but
Sure. Yeah.
because I care about the effect of the.
Rapid
Anyways,
flashing.
I care about that, but I think it's more important to me that we're allowing for these
Delivering,
things to unfold.
I get that, but the delivery has to mean something, right? Because it's taxpayer funded.
But that's where I'd say if we do a front-ending a lot of that work to make sure that we're giving money in places we think that will make an impact, as opposed to trying to spend a lot of staff time after the fact to quantify the impact that we had, I think that probably leads to a reduction in admin burden. But I don't know.
Well, I think that's true for certain programs, like the SPOT program, you want to quantify the impact, right? Because that's the purpose of it. It's there to increase the safety of your neighborhood. So once you want to quantify that, a community event, you may not necessarily have to quantify it because it's an open event to the whole community. What are you really going to quantify? But the impact of a flashing beacon or the impact of, improvements on your street, I would think you'd want to quantify that.
I think you guys are really hitting on a tension that we're feeling of, is the goal in creating these programs just to see more work get done? Or is the goal to increase the outcome or improve the outcomes? And I think it's both and, but I think you kind of have to look, where are you going to put all your time? Because if we're out there chasing, is every dollar we're investing delivering the right outcome? There's a question. I mean, the amount of staff time you have to spend on that, there's, I think, a legitimate question of, would it have just been better for the city to either do that work themselves? Are we almost cutting off our nose to spite our face by putting these funds out? I think there's a sweet spot to find, but I think I'm just speaking as the city manager here, I think we sometimes put ourselves in a rock and a hard place where it's like, council and the community are frustrated we're not getting these out fast enough, and we've got to be doing more and more and more. And council and the community are going to get upset that we are spending these dollars and we can't speak to the exact report on every kind of dollar that has been spent.
Okay, so can we agree that if we're talking about funding a proven best practice traffic, improvement where the city would see liability in its implementation if it's done wrong, that's different than funding a community event to get some community members together and celebrate a certain, these are two different things. Still a good example, but perhaps
I'll let you give a better example.
No, I don't need to right now, but I reserve the right to dig into the weeds on something else. I'm just saying, in that instance, we definitely want to see that there's a benefit to the community because we're implementing something that has a best practice, and traffic engineers are a part of helping to decide. We're not just going to put rapid flashing beacons on every corner because we get grant applications to do so, even if SPOT had millions of dollars in it. It's just a different pile of fruit.
Yeah.
I will just say that, I think you started us off saying we weren't going to dig into individual programs, and I don't want to dig further necessarily into SPOT, but I do want to sort of put a pin in the idea that I have felt since we had our board and commission report outs and the one from the PSAC, that we do need to kind of do some deeper dive at some point into SPOT, because it doesn't sound like there's a great understanding on that committee of their role versus staff role and stuff.
Yeah, we can, I think that's a really good thing we'll get on the forecaster and talk more about.
Can I add just a couple of things? This tension is nothing new, okay? And it's been around, in public institutions forever, and that, we're trying to be good stewards of the taxpayers' money, and you're trying to find that sweet spot that says, because the more oversight, sort of ensuring that money is being well spent, adds cost. It adds cost, and so what are you willing to live with? What is enough oversight? And so that tension it's been there for forever. I will say on the whole idea of just doing more programs or not, is that I sort of have this philosophy of approach every request with the idea of saying yes, but not being afraid to say no. Because it kind of gets back to this whole issue of, just because an NDA is saying we need a flashing light here, and that kind of thing, you can respond to that and provide something they want, but was it needed? And so, quite frankly, that's our job, to make hard decisions about whether that was really needed or not. And so I say, open the dialogue with the attempt to say yes, but not being afraid to say no. And quite frankly, that's our job.
Yeah, I appreciate the enforcement piece mentioning that. And I think, I'm not looking at like, okay, well, itemized receipts, but when somebody says, hey, we didn't put on the event, I mean, that's pretty, you don't need to do a lot of oversight on that, right? That's like, okay, well, then the money needs to come back somehow. Like, you can't, I mean, it's taxpayer funds, that you can't just say, okay, and then thousands of, we were just talking about our budget. If we're trying to not lower fees for businesses, but we're gonna just give out grants and not at least, I mean, I wouldn't say enforce it, but at least make sure that those events are being followed through. All you have to do is go, right, to make sure that the event happened. And if they're telling you that the event didn't happen, then they're, at that point, then that's a whole nother discussion.
I hear you, Counselor, totally. I think the other issue, the other policy frame in that fund in particular is trying to make it as low barrier as possible for diverse groups to put on equity and multicultural focused events. And what we've heard is that any kind of onerous reporting requirement is a barrier to even applying. And to Councilor Massey's point, with the exception of Sierra, who was kind of a position we created to help administer the business grant program, all the other programs we've talked about, we haven't had any FTE to oversee. So that's an existing staff person finding a piece of their job and within which to administer this. And I think on that community event fund one, we're talking a couple $100 grants. We're talking an equity focused program that's trying to be as low barrier as possible with staff that already had full workloads. And so this is why I'm having this conversation. I take the feedback, but I just wanted to make sure that I'm running things with the level of rigor and scrutiny. We're going to get to a question in a minute about what are the factors that should trigger a different level of scrutiny and oversight. Because I think, especially as we head into budget, you might start hearing me ask for more resource requests if programs come up, and it is very important that, everything be a reimbursement base or everything have a clawback ability or something like that.
Yeah, I mean, well, I guess my thing is the low barrier. I think there's a difference from low barrier and then getting the grant and not spending it, right? That's not a barrier, that's not a DEI issue, that's not a low barrier issue. That's a different issue, like, oh, well, the weather was bad, we couldn't get the event lined up, we couldn't, but if you don't recoup those funds, then there is a DEI issue, there is an equity issue, because then they got to keep the money, and then that was money that couldn't go to another person's event who may have had things lined up, because it's not like one event comes at a time. Yeah. There's an application process, and they vote on the event, right? So, like, think of how many events might have been sidetracked because of that. Like, there has to be a way to be like, okay, well, that money can now come back to us to go to another event. Like, that's where I see the equity issue is in that. Not necessarily you, like, after you get the grant and then you say, well, we couldn't put on the saying, okay, well then return the funding. It's not like a barrier
So,
issue for me.
I was with you on the like, one easy thing that we can do to show the reporting, the completion of this grant would be, did the event happen?
Right.
Check yes or no.
Right.
But then I also think about, like, last year, there was a huge Pride event scheduled, and the weather did not cooperate, right? And so then, like, tents are rented and
Right.
food is procured and all of these sorts of things that the organizers can't help that.
Yeah, I'm okay with that.
But maybe what we end up doing is not necessarily have, like an enforcement officer, but maybe we just have like a qualitative, like, hey, what's the resolution of this event? Did it happen? If not, what did happen?
Yeah.
And why
Exactly.
wouldn't we be able to
Right.
move those funds to something else? Like sometimes you just don't have the organizing capacity anymore.
And that's fine.
Things change.
Right.
Yeah.
And in that case, at far enough in advance, cool, let's give it to, the next runner-up, something like
Yeah.
that. There
You
has to be
spent the
that.
money, like if you already spent the money on an event and then the weather, something happened, like,
Yeah.
I get that, we're not gonna claw that back. But if it's like, hey, we got the money, we just couldn't get the administrative piece off the ground for this event, and
Right.
nothing went into it, then there should be a way to get those funds back to give that to another event. Those kind of things, I'm with you, that makes sense. Like, I'm not gonna, you put in all that money and time, we're not gonna be an a-hole and be like, hey, we need our money back.
And I
But it's
think
the ones
that-
where you just
yeah.
don't get anything going and the money's just sitting there, that's when I think we should have.
And I want to assure you, Counselor, that we're not just saying, oh, like, well, tough no
Yeah, right,
but it
right.
is, if staff have reached out 4 or 5 times and there's, planning conversations at some point, once you've spent 10 staff hours on chasing that $150 grant, you've triple spent the grant in
Well, yeah, I mean,
the
that's-
effort to get the money back.
Sure.
I mean, if you're talking about little grants like
And
that.
if we're giving examples or hypotheticals, then I think you're already highlighting a couple of the really obvious points in which your go, no-go, right? For a $150 grant, that's a lot different
Yeah.
than a $15,000 grant or even a
Couple hundred.
$1,500 grant. Because you know how many people have applied for those community grants, and that's a larger pool of applicants than we had the funding available.
Absolutely.
So there is a lot of interest in
Yeah.
those, and if we're not able to see one event to fruition, for whatever the reason is, we should be able to try and adjust course.
Yeah.
But I don't think
Yeah.
that the assumption in either of our examples here is that we're gonna
No, not
make
150
staff
bucks.
track down $150.
Totally.
Yeah, my apologies, that's
No,
not what
no,
I was,
no,
it
and
was
I-
more like the 1,000 plus.
Yeah,
This is helpful, but we've never talked about it, and so sometimes it feels like we're shooting in the dark on what the target is. I am gonna just, because we've got 10 minutes left,
Thank you for
No.
helping.
I want to pick up this
My thoughts.
issue of work on public property. So I don't know if our little tool is working anymore.
Can we keep trying it? I like this thing.
Keep trying it, scan your QR
I
code.
like this thing.
This is the question, it's not gonna be live,
Oh, see, this is my first question. This is the one I missed.
Do you already have a vote in?
I'm not showing the votes till the end, till I
Well,
see 5.
I'm wondering if I'm about to double vote.
Yeah, this one came up as my first question.
Yeah, right, and then disappeared.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
I didn't answer it though, so I'm gonna answer it now. Oh, this is a,
What's missing?
I can't get the question out.
Oh, sorry, Mayor.
I had already provided an
Mayor,
answer
can
to
you can
this.
scan?
city-owned property.
Yeah, Will's head is in the way as part of the, part of the issue, but.
The weirdest QR code
It's that
ever.
hair.
Tricky see-through.
That's that session hair.
Okay. Okay.
I haven't ordered yet, sorry guys.
Oh, somehow there's 5 in there. I don't know who's our secret.
I thought there was 8 of us.
I keep seeing Jennifer's phone flash, so.
Joseph, have you
Well,
voted?
that was the question I
Yeah,
got.
Yeah,
I
you
think
were.
if you vote against, again, it's gonna stick with the 5. It's
Peter.
not gonna let you double vote.
Peter over there.
Okay,
Um,
so. Like.
Yeah, I guess you
Okay,
can
so
hear.
this
tough
is
one.
how supportive, is council, well, now I guess we do have over 5. allowing non-city entities to use grant funds to implement projects on city-owned property. So
Election integrity.
at least 3, but maybe 4 are very supportive, and 1 is very opposed. So let's talk about this one a little bit. Anyone who said very supportive, why are you very supportive?
I'm not very supportive. I'm somewhat supportive.
Somewhat supportive.
This was the one that came up before the first question, so I don't know which one of these is my vote, but I did vote on it at some point. But so now I'll just tell you. I'm somewhat supportive because I think that more often than not, when you have non-governmental entities, whether those be individuals or organizations that are not familiar with the guidelines that we have to operate within, and that hasn't, if it's not made explicitly clear in the beginning, then we increase the risk of something going wrong because of miscommunication. That either that, organization has a different interpretation of what public transparency looks like, or liability looks like, or even a permitting process. So I'm supportive of the idea of this if we can take what we've learned and improve the process
To be really
consistently.
clear on the front end.
And the biggest part for me, having sat in on several meetings in which we're trying to work through to yes on this, the biggest part for me is just awareness of the applicant. Are they familiar enough with what our requirements are to be able to make an idea come to fruition? There's no argument. It's a cool idea. That's why we're sitting all around the table, trying to get to yes on it. But if they don't understand in the first place the things that we have to grapple with as a public agency, to make sure that things are safe and that all of our needs around liability are met, then it's going to increase the miscommunication.
Sure.
And that gets worse the closer toward the deadline or the release date or, the unveiling or whatever that needs to be.
Yeah.
It gets worse as everything else gets more stressful. So I'm still somewhat supportive, but
So,
it's been a tough one to work through.
So I'm very opposed, and I'll tell you why. I'm not opposed to non-city entities doing things on city-owned property, like for events and that kind of thing. But we've been talking about, a budget crunch and, limited grant funds. So I'm trying to envision a scenario where I would support giving grant funds to a non-city entity.
Well, so just do recall that sometimes these grant funds are not out of our general fund, right? So the Good Neighbor Grant is money coming from WES. We administer it, but it is money coming from WES. It is not coming out of our general fund.
So is there an example of that being used for a non-government, for a non-city entity?
Yeah, so I think 3 of our Good Neighbor Grant Program applications, maybe even 4, were nonprofits or neighborhood associations asking to do projects in city parks or green spaces.
I'm okay with the NDAs, but I'm not sure who the other people are.
Well, I think 2 of the 3 are doing on spaces that are not on public.
Okay.
And then 2 of them are looking at using grant dollars to do some project-related work, but also educational.
My issue is using limited grant funds for non-city entities. There may be some examples that, I'd be willing to, but I'm having a hard time coming up with. Because they're limited, so I want to focus those grant funds on city entities.
Well, the point of them is that city entities don't have capacity to do all this work. It's supposed to be a force multiplier. It's supposed to be an ability to do things that the...
I can be convinced, but I need some examples. I don't know how this works.
I think at times it can be a force multiplier, but it can also be a huge administrative burden.
I think that's what we're finding.
In terms of managing some of the regulatory compliance that exists on some of our properties, whether it's properties that are in flood zones, so like where we're trying, there's entities that want to do work, that becomes sort of a compliance piece and a challenge to get to the place where we can say yes, and it's, we're working to try to say yes, but it can be hard because of those, as well as, it connects back to some of our green space management plan that we're going through, gonna work on, and identifying how do we best utilize and manage these spaces. And there's different ideas from different stakeholders.
And I think, so Good Neighbor, those were kind of, were they up to 50K grants?
Up to 50.
So pretty large scale. But let's take another non-general fund, but URA placemaking grants. So this was one where small, 10,000, and we were excited. We had MERCAC excited, we got direction, we were like, let's go fast. And all of the interest of that has been on public property, or most of the interest so far. And that has, I think, to your great point, Counselor, has caught us somewhat flat-footed, because in our desire to be nimble and get things out, we didn't maybe have all the answers or communicate all the standards we would hold ourselves to. So then we had frustrated applicants who are having to go through kind of a clunky process. And at the end of it, I do wonder if it really was a force multiplier, or if we had just spent those URA dollars on city-led placemaking efforts in the right-of-way or in public spaces, if we would have done it faster and quicker. Now, that doesn't mean that there weren't total benefits of doing it, but it's why we wanted to have sort of the philosophical discussion about your real desire here and objectives here.
I was the neutral. And the reason I was neutral is because I'm not opposed to it necessarily, because I think it can do a lot of good. But for me, it was I needed to hear some examples, because I also know dealing with some of the applicants can be difficult as well. So my question is, how much of what Councilor Stavengord said, because that's kind of where I was like, when she said that, then I'm like, okay, that's where I see that working that way. How much of what she said of having those guidelines would have helped in those scenarios? Like, would it have prevented a lot of that administrative burden if you had something that Councilor Stavengord had talked about where it just kind of worked up? Like, these are the expectations if you want to do it on city property?
I think in regards to Good Neighbor, we're trying to get to a place where we can say yes and work with groups to do things, but there's some challenges that we didn't realize at the time, and perhaps some of those guidelines would have been helpful. I think if we would have had a green space management plan in place, that would have been really super helpful. It would have set the table there on what type of projects could be eligible on certain public properties versus other public properties. So
that would be helpful.
I think it would have been helpful, and I frankly don't know. I think we could have gone a little slower on placemaking, but I don't think we would have foreseen every question.
Yeah.
And we still would have had a very painfully bumpy rollout. And to Peter's point, we don't have all the answers, but where it's an internal-led project, we can kind of have those policy questions, or we can bring them to you all. Right. When we have an applicant in front of us and they're asking us and I'm having to weigh our tree policies, our public space policies or lack thereof, our economic development policies, it's challenging, and we end up spending a lot of time on that.
So far, has it been a force multiplier? Has it worked as it was intended? I
think yes and no. I think the business grants have been a force multiplier. I think Joseph found the sweet spot of the right level of administrative oversight there. Yeah. I think placemaking's been challenging. I think I hope I'm not speaking out of turn to my wonderful staff who manage these programs. I think Good Neighbor has been maybe more challenging than we expected.
I think that's fair, but I think in the long run, I think it'll be good.
So it's not necessarily the projects themselves, it's the regulations of dealing with city property, right? Or is it the projects too?
It's educating the people.
It's
educating the applicants.
Certainly providing some guidelines, having a green space management plan in place would have really been really helpful. I do think, we have a couple of the grants that I do think as we move through the expenditures and funding those, that they will be force multipliers.
Yeah.
So,
Part of this might be bumpiness, but as I experience bumpiness in my job, I feel like it's important to daylight that bumpiness to you all to make sure it's worthwhile bumpiness.
Sure.
And I think the results we're seeing in my totally unscientific and terribly set up poll is that the majority of you do think it's worth keeping going down this track.
I would also say with the Good Neighbor program as well, there was there was a desire to get that funding out there because we have some requirements from Wes in terms of utilizing those dollars. Otherwise, they can claw back money. So.
Does Wes help with any of that? Does Wes help with any of the
No, I mean,
project stuff,
No,
scopes?
so, frankly, what Wes wanted to do, the original Good Neighbor program, they handled all the funding. We used our Kellogg Good Neighbor committee to make recommendations, brought them to council. Council would say yes or no, and then we would provide that to Wes, and Wes would fund that work. They didn't like doing that. They would give us the money to do that. And they also, frankly, they provided a broader use of those funds, both in terms of eligibility, but geographically. So we've expanded that geographical boundaries that we could use it on. So
Nice.
I think that's been a good program.
Do you feel like in reflection of the applications that you have had the opportunity to review and work through, you are now able to look at an outline for this type of program when it comes to city-owned property, to say, even just, like at the application point, will this occur on city-owned property? Yes or no? And if it's yes, then we move over into this other column. And then we say, how many different jurisdictions are involved? More than 5? Cool, maybe this is like have a staff liaison with you at all times. If it's just one jurisdiction, maybe you have an orientation meeting to go through what the permitting requirements are for us, for that other jurisdiction. We have a point of contact with that other jurisdiction. If we have questions, identify within the plan of implementation of even just the contract implementation of at what point we need staff review for each element. Do you need public works review? And at what point? Do you need a green space review? And at what point? Do you need legal review? And at what point? Is the financial amount high enough that maybe we should have a legal review at the beginning? And
I think the answer is yes, we've learned enough to make that schematic. I think what we can do a better job in the future going forward when these programs come up is give you a better pre-accounting of what we think the administrative cost to do that work. Because I love that, but each of those then takes time. And I think we maybe got a little out over our skis on some things thinking, well, it's as simple as we'll get an application up and we got the money, it's good. And then we've just, it's consumed staff time that we didn't expect it to.
Right, but at a certain point, you've learned enough to be able to reduce the staff time after the fact, because you're building that into the front process. And starting with yes doesn't mean green light yes. Starting with yes means we're gonna work with you through this process and try and figure out how, to build a public-private partnership.
And I would say we did not approve all of the applications that we got, all of the grant proposals that we got. I think we ended up with 6, and we got 6 proposals and moved 4 forward, and we've got agreements with 3, and we're still trying to work through some details on the 4th. So.
Did we get through your agenda?
I had 2 more questions. We are over time, so I don't think I'm going to ask them. What I was going to was, and I'm going to ask those ones as a follow-up in my one-on-ones. Will you tell me what questions you might still want to dig into on this topic? I've got a lot from our conversation, and I guess it skipped. We talked a little bit about what should determine the level of oversight. I've heard things like it's got to do a cost-benefit analysis. Are we spending $1,000 of staff time to chase an $150 grant? No. So I think level of funds is an important one. I think I've heard public property. We got to just be upfront about what we would require of ourselves, and we require those of the applicants that are coming with us. But I think my big takeaway, I think there is difference of opinion, which I kind of wanted to daylight. I think everyone maybe has a better understanding of the administrative time this all takes. But I think I'm hearing you want us to keep moving in this direction as a city, keep these programs, a majority of you do, keep the programs we have thus far, and you want to keep entertaining potentially more. We will just do a better job of articulating the administrative costs of those as they arise.
And I think we're seeing front loading that work and being really clear about your expectations so you don't have to do as much.
Yeah, so we may have to go slower. So you may have a phenomenal idea and I may have to tell you, great, that'll take 6 months for us to launch. Even if the money's there, it's just gonna take that much time for us to work and Justin to review and everything to be ready to go, even if it seems simple.
I want to piggyback on that, and I want to say, I think that this is a really good topic, and I'm glad that you brought it out. And I will tell you that I'm glad that it's been, you know, all of these grants have been aggregated so that we can see them all, you know, in a basket. Because, you know, we get an idea from NDA, we go to an LOC meeting, we talk to someone else in another city, and we say, hey, great idea, I want to do that. Okay? And so we kind of do those in isolation without thinking about all of the other things in the basket. And so I think that, you know, we need to think about this because we're talking about, you know, staff capacity, budgets, and that kind of thing. And, you know, we really have to think about, you know, what's really, really important, what's a real priority, because we can't do everything. And I will tell you that I think I've been, you know, seeing the light that there's just more to these programs than, quite frankly, I think we appreciate. And so I have a suggestion. You know, take your hour of time from the city manager and not go talk to the department head about instituting you know, another grant or another program, but take that hour and go sit beside someone administering one of those programs and really understand what they're having to do to execute it. Because I think that would be eliminating.
Thanks, Robin.
Yeah. It hurts.
Yeah, it hurts. Yeah.
We have a workload impact section of our staff reports, and I think I will also, I mean, it'll be more work to do this, but I think I will encourage my staff to be a little more honest in that about the workload that comes with the things that, all great ideas, but they do all have a cost.
I can't make this commitment on behalf of my colleagues, but I can make this commitment of my time with you. When we as council get excited about, you know, the next big grant opportunity, or how we think we're coming up with a solution that responds to some of the needs that we're hearing in the community, if at that point it becomes the administrative heartburn, you know, starts to start, I would like to discuss that in my meeting with you. I would like you to pose hard questions to me in that meeting and make me think through that checklist of what my best thought is around how you start out a program like that or administer a program, or where I think the pitfalls might be, or anything like that. I would like to use my time with you for you to grill me. And then when we have a discussion like this, I feel like you should be able to bring some of those aha moments or those concerns or the added heartburn or things like that. I feel comfortable putting on the table in front of my colleagues.
Yeah, thank you.
And I hope that others would do that as well, and perhaps we can meet either in twos, or I know that's still 5 hours of your time, right? Which is really valuable.
Yeah.
But I would say, I want you to ask that of me.
I really appreciate that, Counselor, and I'd also say I've appreciated, we love this because it capacitates the community. The community then has expectations, and there have been some times where your staff have fielded some heat from applicants who I think are frustrated with various elements here. I have appreciated the support from several of you in some of those hard community member conversations, and I would just ask that you also be willing to continue to do that, because we're doing the best we can to move your great ideas forward to support your policy outcomes, and sometimes it's not going to be the most perfect, beautiful rollout.
Well, and I mean, I would piggyback on Counselor Stavenger's point to also say, and well, on both of these points, to say, you know, you showed us that list, and it's true. I mean, most of them came up in the last biennium. So that is a lot of new programs. And maybe it is time to say, okay, we're not canceling any of these, but we're going to work to get them really fully fleshed out and get the guardrails set up and get the expectations set up before we consider any more.
Yeah, or use that as a point of reflection to say, if all of these new programs have come up in the last biennium, then what is this a symptom of? Are we hearing more from the community that they want things that we're not providing? Or are we not happy or satisfied or engaged in council goals? Or are we just not taking, like, slow your roll for an answer?
Yeah.
But, I mean, there are probably a lot of other options there. Those are just the three that come to mind.
Yeah.
But maybe then we need to evaluate why we have so many of these things that are popping up within a biennium. I mean, maybe a biennial, ooh, Michael's gone, so I can say maybe we should be budgeting on an annual basis and then making adjustments.
Oh, funny,
The county talked today about the reverse.
About doing the reverse, yeah.
Sure they
I want to make sure you guys have time to eat, but thank you for the conversation. I appreciate it. There'll be, I'm sure, a lot more to come.
All right, we are adjourned and back in 15 minutes.
Grandma Jean's around.
Yeah.